All right. So Miranda is going to spend the first half of our session talking about birding and the work she does with birds. Miranda is currently in graduate school down at Georgia, doing a lot of work with the endangered red cockaded woodpeckers, and she's been doing a bunch of other bird work in other positions recently. She's going to talk about birding, how to get into birding, how to use Ebird, which is the citizen science program I mentioned in our past newsletter. And then for the rest of our session, we're going to have Yao Foli here. He's going to talk about his work over in Ghana with Indoor Eco Village and some of his citizen science work as well. He's been done part of like a noise project with Cornell. He's done some work at Indoor, all sorts of different things. He's going to have a lot of cool experiences to talk about as well. And as always, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, or we'll have time for questions when both of them are done. So Miranda, to start off with you, I guess, why birds? Out of all the things, why did you pick birds to become obsessed with?
Well, my sophomore year of college, I took a ornithology class as a extracurricular for my wildlife degree. And when I started taking it, at first I didn't care at all about birds. I had a friend that was really into birds, and I actually like kind of gave her a hard time about it. And then as I got into the class, I realized how neat birds are. And there's something that's, I've always been into like snakes and stuff, but those are sometimes harder to find and you don't see them every day. But you can walk outside just about anywhere and find birds. And so it's a really neat hobby to get into. And there's just so many different types of birds, and you can get good at sight ID, you can get good at audio and calls and songs. And so it's a really fun hobby to get into, and you can just do it literally anywhere, even like in a Walmart parking lot. So literally it's a hobby you can do anywhere in the world. That's why I really like it. And there's just so much diversity everywhere. So that's really cool.
And how does one go about getting involved in birding? What sort of the first steps to take if you know nothing about birds and want to get started?
Yeah, so if you know next to nothing about birds and you have access to the internet like tonight, easy websites you can go to are Sibley, and I actually have a Sibley bird guide. You can purchase bird guide books or ask for your Christmas from your parents or something like that. There's tons of different little field guides. This one's smaller, like a little pocket guide of just major species in North America, and then this one is specific to the Southeast, and then there's plenty of other field guides that are specific to Central America. There's plenty of other different regional field guides that can get more specific. I also have an older almost antique field guide one of my grandparents gave me that only has warblers, and so it's warblers from all over the world, and that's a different type of small songbird, and there's tons of different species of those, so that they can compromise a book all on their own. But starting with a book, or where you can look online, or actually lots of different bird companies have bird apps, and so like I have a I don't know if it'll focus or not, I have a Merlin bird ID app. And you can actually put in where you're at, and it's all free. You can put in where you're at and describe a bird, and it'll bring up different types of birds that are in your area at the time and try to help you figure out what bird it was. And that's a really good starting point. If you know anyone in your area that birds, or have a family member that birds and can take you out and show you, that's number one, because it's really good to go out with someone that's experienced and try to teach you things. Other options are Facebook forums or online forums that can help you out, or there's different web pages you can post a picture of a bird and people will come on and ID it for you, so that's really neat. Another good thing to get into birding is to have a good pair of binoculars. These will help you get a lot better view of birds, and it can really help you learn how to better ID birds. There are different features that you try to look for to start to figure out what bird you're looking at and how to better ID it. And so you can start off generally with just like the size of the bird, and can narrow it down from there. So usually apps or bird books will have you look at like whether it was cardinal sized or crow sized or seagull size. They'll kind of give you a couple general sizes, and you can pick what size it was, and it'll help you start to figure it out. Another good thing to figure out is just what birds are in your region at the time. Migration happens in the spring and in the fall every year, and so birds travel to very distant places. And so you can have birds that wouldn't normally be in your area if they're traveling through at the time. So that's another really good thing to learn about as well.
All right, Miranda. Now, In our newsletter, we talked about the citizen science platform Ebird. Now, you use Ebird a lot, both as a researcher and as a citizen scientist. Could you go into a little more detail? Tell us a little bit about how Ebird works.
Absolutely. So I'm going to screen share and go ahead and get on Ebird really quick, and that way I can go ahead and show you guys a little bit of how it works. All right. So this is Ebird. Is it popping up for you, Paul?
Got it.
All right, awesome. So this is Ebird. I went ahead and logged into my account so everyone could kind of see how it works when you make an account. But if you don't have an account already, there'll just be a little tab up here that says create an account, and you can go on. It's free. You don't need anything. You can just put in your name. You can put in a fake name if you don't want your name out there, whatever you want to do. And then from there, you can go ahead and create lists of birds that you see. You can submit sightings of things. And you can also look at data that people have put in from their lists that scientists use. So I have actually had to do this before, but I'll go ahead and start with the list. So everywhere in the world, people can submit an eBird list, and it's really, really neat. So if you go out and bird somewhere, you write down all the birds that you see. If there's some you don't know, maybe you write down what they look like and then go home and try to research it and figure it out. You can also take pictures of birds and submit it with your sighting, and they'll tell you whether it was right or not. Like if you are 100% sure that the bird you saw was this bird, you can submit a picture if you get one, and it can correct you on that if you needed help with the identification. But basically, when you go on here, you can submit a place for a list, and so usually it goes by counties. You can also rename places. So these are all the places I've ever birded, and I've put names in there of what they are. But let's say we went to a new place. I currently work in Baker County, Georgia. Hold on, let's see. I don't know if it's gonna pop up or not. Georgia. Let's do Georgia, United States, and then find it on a map. And then you can go ahead and actually pop where you are on the map, and that way you can narrow it down for them. So I work right here. Let's see, right there. That's the Jones Center at Itchaway. So I can go on, and let's say I bird while I'm at work, and I see a really rare bird, or I just see about 15 or 20 species of birds. I can say,
Okay, she'll be back eventually. I
think that's a network problem.
Yeah, this happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Normally not for quite this long, though. Okay. Oh, and we just lost her. All right, that's
Maybe
there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. It just dropped off.
All good. It happens sometimes, you know. You dropped off around the point where you were talking about finding the location in Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me go back a step then. Let's see. So I ended up picking where I work, but basically you can put in a state on the map. You can choose Ohio, wherever you want to go, and it'll pop up hotspots, or you can create your own little spot if it's at your house or wherever. But let's just say we went over here to Richmond Park in Ohio. I don't know where that's at. But basically you can go ahead and choose the date that you went birding, whether you were walking or you were stationary, what time you did it and how long, and then how far you walked if you were traveling, and then the number of people in your party. And this is so eBird can calculate like total number of effort of how many hours and how many people were birding in the party. And so after that, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta put that. After that, you go over and it's gonna basically put every species that you're likely to see, and it's gonna put it in order of different groupings of birds. And so this has waterfowl, hummingbirds, shorebirds, and you just go through and you'll put how many you saw. So let's say we saw one Cooper's hawk, or how many you heard. You can if you can accurately identify the call or song, then you can go ahead and just put what you heard. You don't have to necessarily see it. So one Cooper's hawk, one downy woodpecker, 3 blue jays, a Carolina chickadee, and then if there were to be anything that you saw that you think is rare, you can also hit this button called Show Rarities, and it will show you all these birds that are probably migrating right now. So they're or they've migrated and they're no longer in your area. But it would be possible for you to have seen them if it were some rare migrational challenge bird or whatever. And so you can put those in, and typically those will require you to add some details of some kind, maybe describing where you saw it, if you got a picture, or if you aged the bird by, let's say, foliage or whatever. And so that's how you can put those in as well. And that's a really cool thing to do, because sometimes the eBird will contact you and ask for more details if this sighting is a really neat and unique sighting that someone hasn't seen before or anything like that. So after that, you'll say whether you're submitting a complete checklist or not. Let's say I think I've seen some that I need to keep looking in my books for, so it's not complete to me yet. I'll hit submit that it's not complete yet, and then it'll go ahead and put how many species I observed, how many individuals, and this goes on their database, and scientists can then go to the science tab of eBird, and this can show you all different types of data about different species all across the world. And you can also go through, and so for a project I did with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, I got to go through and download eBird data products, and so you can go through and you'll basically request access to certain data, and you'll put in, when you request the access, it'll ask you like what your name is, if you have a project going on, what the project title is, and then kind of give a little bit of information as to what you're going to use the data for, and you can submit it, and someone from eBird will get back to you with the access codes or grant you access to it, and that way you can go ahead and use the data. There's other data that's public that you can see, so it can show you species maps of and ranges of different birds, which is really neat. So this is another cool tool that eBird has, so you can enter a name, you can enter a species. Paul, what's your favorite bird species? Should we do peregrine falcon?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm not a bird guy, so I have to think about that.
So peregrine falcon, we'll do the North American one, since that's the one that's closest to us most of us over here. And it'll basically show you, you can zoom in and it'll show you all the places that peregrine falcons have been detected in the United States. And you can get closer and it can show you more detailed data as you get closer to it, maybe about like exactly which town it was in, which time of year. And that way, let's say you're looking for you want to see a peregrine falcon, you can, it'll give you more data, and maybe if you go to that spot around that time, you might be able to see it. So this was in October of 2018. There was a peregrine falcon seen at the Quail National Wildlife Refuge in Kansas. So if you're in that area at that time, you can try to go see a bird that you haven't seen yet. And that's another really cool thing, is a lot of big birders have life lists. And so these are birds that basically there's two types of life lists. There's lists cumulatively of every bird you've ever seen. And so if you keep up with your eBird, which I haven't because I'm a slacker, it'll tell you actually how many species you've observed. So I've seen supposedly 119 species, but unfortunately I haven't logged in every bird I've ever seen. And people will like to keep up with that. And so big birders will have seen 700 or 800 birds, and they'll travel to other states to find those specific birds that they haven't seen before. They'll go on birding trips every year to see different birds in different regions. Some people are very committed. And then the other type of life listing bird is your kind of bucket list bird. And those are birds that you want to see at some point in your lifetime. So these are birds that might be only in one certain area, or very rare or endangered species. And so those are birds that people would really, really like to see. But there's a lot you can do on eBird, and it's definitely a really neat site to be able to use. And there's just a lot of different data You can look at photos and sounds that scientists have put on here to learn more about bird calls, and that's another really good tool of eBird as well. And then hotspots, where people see a lot of different species of birds, is another really cool thing to look at for your area, so that you can go to some places that have a lot of different birds. But that's basically the general rundown of eBird.
All right. Thank you, Miranda.
Yeah.
Now, here at the Wilds, I believe, now don't quote me on this for sure because I haven't completely confirmed it yet, but I believe we're going to be trying to be hosting a Christmas bird count sometime in mid-December or so. So Miranda,
Awesome.
can you maybe talk a little bit, you probably know a little more than me about what this involves. What exactly is a Christmas bird count?
Yeah, Christmas bird counts are a lot of fun. So I've done several Christmas bird counts, but basically it's a program that's been going on since I believe the mid to late 1900s, and basically everywhere across the nation. I think actually there's some places that do it worldwide, but basically there's been different areas mapped out of different routes that people will drive, and basically these people that are really good at identifying the local birds in that area will go through and they'll stop at different points along the way, and you basically bird all day long and you record every single bird you've seen or heard. And it basically is trying to get an accurate number of the bird population for the year. And it's really cool because it's all over. So you can go on and there's actually a Christmas bird count database that you can go on to and look at the different data. But it's a really good way, especially if you go with experienced birders, it's a really good way to learn new species and learn how to better identify songs and calls, because that's probably the most difficult part of birding, is figuring out those songs and calls and what tricks to remember them and stuff like that. So that's a really awesome thing that you guys will hopefully get to do.
Yeah, in a normal year, I believe we would have that on December 21st. Again, this is not a normal year, so I'm not 100% sure what we'll be doing. I need to talk with my boss about that, and I will be doing that shortly, I believe. But
Yeah,
in theory, on December 21st, we might be having a whole bunch of experienced birders out here at the Wild. So anyone who would like to learn more about birding can come join us and learn bird stuff from bird people. Wyatt, in theory, the other guy who is maybe going to join us today, will probably be there. Some other birders. So stay tuned for that information, but hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, that will be happening in about, actually, exactly a month? Yeah, exactly 1 month from now.
Right. Heck yeah.
I understand that, totally. So, Miranda, you've been doing a lot of different bird work, either with the DNR, at the Jones Center, with the Smithsonian. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the different bird projects you've been working on lately? Or in the past years?
Recently, we have an endangered species that Paul mentioned earlier of red cockaded woodpecker. And
Oh no. It's not as bad as some people we've had on it for these. We'll give her another minute.
You can see the pictures?
Yeah, just you froze like right as you started talking, so.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was showing them. Okay.
Yeah, you see the picture now.
Awesome. All right, let's see what we got going on. So I'll start with in the order the pictures are, I guess. So well, I can actually find the red cockaded woodpecker and start there. Okay, so red cockaded woodpeckers are an endangered species of woodpecker in the southeastern area of the United States, and they kind of range from Texas all the way down into Florida, and up into the Carolinas. And they are very, I'm gonna hop around, I'm sorry, this is not in any order. Okay, so this is a very ugly woodpecker, I'm sorry, he was a little banged up, he flew into a tree, but he was okay. But this is a red cockaded woodpecker, not the best specimen of him, but he is a young red cockaded woodpecker, and they are small woodpeckers, and they actually live in family groups, so it's a very unique type of biology for these woodpeckers. They live with their parents typically and help out for several years until they go off on their own. And so that's called, they live in clusters of longleaf pine trees, and red cockaded woodpeckers are the only species of woodpecker to excavate cavities in a living tree. So that's another really cool tidbit about them. And typically they try to go after trees that have this fungus called red heart fungus, and it makes the internal wood of the tree softer so that they have a better time excavating cavities. But in the early 70s and 80s, red cockaded woodpeckers numbers dropped drastically. There was less than 10,000 in the entire United States. And so biologists started working and figuring out what they could do to help these birds. And one of the big things that they discovered was the use of artificial cavities. And so that's me on a Swedish ladder is what that's called. And basically what we do is we climb about 35 feet up. That's the average height of their cavities. And we cut a hole, a box into a tree, and basically put what looked like a bluebird box into the tree. And then we wood putty it into the tree. So this was yesterday. I put a new box in. We wood putty it into a tree, and then we spray paint it white because these woodpeckers will peck the trees and make white sap come out of them. And so when we spray paint it white, it kind of mimics that white sap that they do. And these birds will actually move into these little artificial cavities. And it kind of head starts them because cavities can take over 3 years to be excavated. And so it can really, really hinder a bird population when they have nowhere to stay. They get killed off really easily if they're having to roost in tree branches and stuff. And so these cavities are extremely important to their ecology. And that's a picture from farther away of the cavity I did yesterday. You can see the little entrance cavity hole. But basically, biologists will make these little cavities, and we put them into the tree. And it's a really, really neat thing to get to do. You have to use a chainsaw up in the tree, which is a little scary, but it's definitely really cool. Another species that I've gotten to work with is northern bobwhite quail. And so I got to put transmitters on some birds that we released into some new properties that used to have quail and don't have them anymore due to poor management. And people have started to use prescribed burning and better manage for these quail. And so they're able to try to start repopulating in these areas. And so we got to do a fun little quail release, and that little brown thing underneath his chin is a little tracker. And so every couple weeks I go out with a big antenna and a radio transmitter detector, and I will actually go out and find all the birds and make sure that they're doing good, and kind of check on the populations in those areas that we release them. This is a little fledgling house sparrow that I found in the parking lot one day that had tried to fly a little too far from home, and so I brought him back over to his nest, and he made it up safely. But that's just another random little bird I found at work the other day. I put this picture in here because this is another thing that you can do to kind of get a better picture of a bird. It's kind of difficult at first, but this is called Digiscoping. And basically you can put your phone's camera up to the eye of a binocular hole, and you can use the zoom of the binocular to get a better picture of a bird. So that on the left is a roseate spoonbill, and then the other three birds are immature wood storks. And I was trying to get a good picture of them, of the roseate spoonbills, because those are really cool species of bird that are actually pink. But that's another neat tool to be able to use if the bird is too far away, but you of it. It's a little difficult and it can be frustrating, but you can put your camera up to your binoculars and get a photo of them. So that's another neat little trick for birding. So that's that red cockaded woodpecker. Another thing we do with these red cockaded woodpeckers is we band the fledglings after they hatch at about 9 or 10 days. We'll go in and we'll take all of the nestlings out of the cavity, and we'll bring them down to the ground, and we put bands on them, and each bird will get a specific band that only it has. So we can go back and identify every single individual on Itchaway, and that helps us keep track of our total number of red cockaded woodpeckers on the site where I work. And that's another really, really cool thing we get to do. So that's me putting the bands on, and you can see that band is in half green, and on one leg will be a silver band with its that's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service unique ID band, and it also gets a above the silver band, and that tells us what cluster he's from. And then on the other side it will have 3 bands, and the order of the bands is how we identify what individual that woodpecker is. And we keep track of that in a database at my work, and we record whether it's a male or female and the bands we put on them, and that's how we can keep up with our red cockaded woodpecker population. So the last thing, the other main project I've worked on with birds is a yellow-billed cuckoo project with the Smithsonian. So I worked with the Smithsonian last summer and traveled to 3 different states, and we caught yellow-billed cuckoos, and they're a really cool species. So they're a neotropical migrant. So every year during nesting and breeding season, they come into central and southeastern North America, and they will nest, and then during migration in the winter, they go all the way down into South America, and they stay there until it warms back up, and then they head back up to the United States and into Canada a little bit. And so what our goal is their populations are declining. So a postdoctoral student at the Smithsonian was trying to find out more about why they're declining and if there's a place somewhere on their migration route that they're not surviving as well. And so that little box on the back of this bird is actually a solar powered satellite transmitter that will last as long as the bird is alive, basically. And that the sun powers the little box, and it sends pings to a satellite, and we can keep track of everywhere the bird goes. And so we put those on 15 birds last summer. We caught 5 birds in Texas, 5 birds in Tennessee, and 5 birds in Illinois. And we put these satellite transmitters on, and it was a really, really neat experience. That's another good view of the yellow-billed cuckoo. But we caught these birds by using canopy nets. And so they were about 35 feet tall nets that we put up in the woods. And then we would use large speakers to play their call, and these birds are territorial, and so they would actually come in and fly into the net because they would hear the call. And so it was really, really fun. We had to dress up in camouflage and hide from the birds, and then we'd play these calls, and then as soon as they would hit the net, we'd have to lower the net down and grab the bird out before it could get too tangled up in the net, and then we would put these transmitters on to find out more about them. So that's another picture of a yellow-billed cuckoo. They're a really neat species. And this is me doing some measurements on the bill of the yellow-billed cuckoo to take data on them, because we would take a lot of data when we banded them and put the satellite transmitters on them. Some other random pictures I threw in here. This is a common nighthawk in Texas that I got a nice picture of. They're a really cool species. They are similar to, they're similar to whippoorwills, and they were actually a group of birds called goat suckers. And that was an old wives' tale that at night they would go and suck the blood of goats in farms, but it's not true. They were actually feeding on the bugs above the farm animals, and people just thought they were some sort of vampire bird. So that was kind of a neat little fun tale I heard about them. And then lastly, this was a really neat picture I thought I would show everyone of a broadwing hawk that got to be rehabbed and released. It had been injured, and a group in Tennessee rehabbed him and then released him back into the wild, and I got to go help with his release, and it was a really, really neat thing to do last summer when I helped with the Smithsonian. So those are just some random pictures of some field work that I've done.
All
Do we have
right.
some questions down here? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Miranda. We did have one question from Caitlin in the chat about the roseated spoonbills. I already kind of answered it, but just to confirm, they are naturally pink, correct?
Yes, they are. They are really cool species. Yeah.
All right. So before we transition, did anyone have any questions for Miranda about doing field work with birds or using eBird? If you have questions later, you can throw them in chat as well, but I figure we give it a little time to ask some questions if you have any.
Mhm.
If not, then we will transition over now.
All right.
All right. So Mr. Yao Foli. Yao Foli is the director, as I mentioned, of this really neat organization over in Ghana called Indoor Eco Village. I believe I'm pronouncing that right, but I've only ever read it, so he can confirm that.
Yes, you're pronouncing it right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So if you could tell us, before we get to the whole bird connection, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your organization does.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And then, Miranda, that was so great presentation. And also, thank you for all the audience as well. My name is Yao Foli. I'm from Ghana, West Africa. I'm the founder of Indoor Eco Village. I came to America in 2007 due to the scholarship that I got for my environmental activism. So it was my intention to return back home to give back to my community what I've learned here, and then also paying attention in my mind what I've noticed or what I'm seeing going wrong in my community. So after I graduated, I moved to Ithaca to get involved in agricultural works and then natural ways of growing food, because that is one of my major. And lo and behold, I got involved with the ICBOs. The ICBO stands for Independent Community-Based Organization. It is made up of 15 different organizations coming together as one, representing marginalized community in research conduction within their communities. So my work with joining the ICBOs have deepened and strengthen my understanding of community development, community engagement based on equity, diversity, and then inclusion. That have got me into the noise pollution project, sponsored by the National Science Foundation. The noise pollution project is supposed to be done right just here in America, because that is what the grant is for. But since I'm from Ghana and I have an organization, it's still a good idea to take the knowledge and all the concept that we are working on noise pollution back home. So I decided to conduct a survey on the noise pollution while I was in Ghana. So while I was home, there are a lot of noise generators in my community, like a lot of things that can generate noise. So I have to ask myself, what do I have to consider the most noises that we can work on with my community? So I decided to work on the corn mill machine. It's made up of a cast iron. That's where it's used to grind corn, change corn into flour. And that is it's a very vital machine. Every household goes to the corn mill almost every day, either adult or child being sent to go and grind corn. And then the noise generated by that machine is over 100 decibels. And then learning about noise pollution and its effects, it's very dangerous if we don't act. What can we do to reduce that? And it's also a plus for public health. So I intended interviewing people that work, operate the corn mill machine, and then also interview individual people that live close to the corn mill machine. Like, how do you feel? This noise is coming right from your neighborhood. And through their answers, through their experiences, I'm jotting down points that we can work with. This will be the concerns of the people. And then from their own conversations, we can use such things as a guideline in making rules and regulations about noise pollution. And then on other projects that I'm involved in also is about the increased use of toxic chemicals in agriculture. So I've noticed my community is a farming community, and then we have a lot of evergreen forests and then a lot of food, fresh markets full of greens. So the problem we have is the process of growing it and then the ethic behind it. And that also leads to water contamination. So I was also working on interviewing local farmers. Why do you use chemicals? Why do you use what you do to produce your crops? What are the alternatives? And then collecting all these stories, going back again, I will be using these stories again. We work on preventive measures, like how to get back to growing food healthy by using the right alternative system to prevent our water pollution and then also to increase health in our system. So these are the projects I've been working on. As of now in Ghana, project working on is like we are fencing around the whole farm so that our animals can, we have livestock like sheep and goats and then chicken. So the sheep and then the goat should not leave the compound to go and graze on maybe a grass that has been sprayed with toxic animal. Maybe that farmer is spraying those grasses to get rid of them. Or maybe the farmer sprayed his vegetables to prevent pesticide. And then maybe when our animals go and eat that, that can cause their life. So we're trying to do the best we can to protect the animals. And so that is like an education for the community. And then our future vision is there should be like a resource center for our local community to have education about sustainable agriculture and then environmental justice, and then getting to know our own environment and understanding scientific principles and processes that we can include in our daily work to solve issues within our communities.
All right, thank you. Honestly, I've told you this before already, but that sounds like an amazing project that I would love to do here if I knew how to run a village here, but I don't. That's okay. So, getting back to the bird connection, I know one of the projects you've been working on there has to do with birds, especially. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what that project involves or hopes to involve in the future.
Yeah. So listening to Miranda was like highlight. I will just start jotting things down because I'm also a new birder. So again, with the ICBO's collaboration on the noise pollution project with Cornell Lab of Ornithology, I had the opportunity to take classes from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So to be a good birder and then to also work with my community, I better get it right. So working on my project, anytime I visit home, there are a lot of birds, beautiful birds I see. And then as I said, working with Cornell Lab of Ornithology, anytime you enter that building, on the walls, oh, beautiful pictures, posters of birds. You cannot take your eyes off the wall at Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And then it was one of our in-person meetings when we have a presenter, just like what Miranda does, and then she talked about, I think that's Abigail, if I'll get the name right. She did a presentation about how to welcome birds on your property. And that was like welcoming, and that was like awakening. I'm like, whoa, I can bring this back to the community, and then we talk about it. And lo and behold, this year I went, first what I did was just like watching, try to just pay attention, the beautiful, colorful bird, the sound. I try to pay attention in the morning time, kind of sound. I did a couple of recordings as well. The kind of sounds I hear in the morning, afternoon, or evening before I leave. So having a conversation on birds with the community members, where did the birds go? That was where the conversation started. Oh, someone was like, well, we have to ask ourselves, but then someone's like, oh, we've cut down all the trees. Where should they build their houses? And then these are the realities. So, and then I made my mind like, well, if we can come together as a community to use our conversation for a conservation project, this is it. So what we started doing is now collecting names. I asked like from the chiefs, the elders, and the young ones, like collecting names of birds in our local dialect. That is the activity one. So depending on whoever, like an elder person will give names of birds that I've never seen before. And then I'm going to give name of birds that are maybe still around or some are not around. I will give names of birds that I've never seen in 10 years or 15 years. So compiling all this name of birds in our local dialect is another way of involving the community, working on birds, discussing why we can't see these birds, listening to an old elder person in the community talking about, oh, we used to see these birds in this season. This is how they used to come, and then questions from the younger ones. So why we don't see them anymore? So through this community conversation, we are conserving our community using birds as our characters, promoting birds' life, and also reforestation, and also leading to other in ecological aspect of contributing to decline of birds in our community. So that is what we are working on right now. And then for the children in the future, it's my idea of coming up with a kids coloring ecological book, like create a story about a bird that save a community. So, and then also I'm working on like writing a memoir about how a young village boy remembers his community while he was young, and then returns to see the change, and then trying to get back his community back to that green state. So this will all be involved with community interaction, storytelling, and also conservation practices culturally.
That's very cool stuff. Again, thank you.
Thank
Now,
you
for some
very
of us
much.
here, especially you're talking about being kind of a new birder and trying to create community efforts to help bring back birds, I guess. Do you have any advice for our kids here, as maybe if they're getting new into birds or want to promote bird activity, create habitat for birds just in their own backyards, maybe? Any advice that you might have either for learning how to bird or being able to create habitat for birds?
Is that for me?
That was for you, yes. Any
Oh,
maybe
okay.
tips that you might
Yeah,
have into birding or possible ways to promote bird habitat just in like a backyard level?
yeah. Just even that, I would say that's even a question I can ask myself. So what I started doing about how can I welcome birds in my community? How can I bring back the birds? So I started planting fruit trees on my property, like papaya. We have I have guava already on my property, so a lot of birds love that. And then so the more diverse of food we have, I think that will bring birds. And then the more calm the environment is, like not like shouting or snapping of stuff, like to scare them out. So I think when they feel like home, they will invite their others. And it's also good to read about bird, like how can I do it? Like having the resources out there online or even through the wires. Miranda is also there. So yeah, that is how I'm working on practically with on our own how to bring back the birds to our community right now.
All right. Miranda, you might know a little bit about this too, as far as, I mean, Yao was talking about planting different types of fruit trees like papayas and stuff to bring back birds. I don't think papaya trees are going to grow real well in Ohio, but I'm not an expert on that, but I would assume not. Do either of you maybe have any ideas of plants that we could plant here that would maybe grow well? Because I am not sure, honestly.
Catalpa trees might be something you could look into. I know a lot of songbirds like those. Another thing are, oh gosh, I'll have to look up, I can look it up while you answer another question and then maybe send it in. There's another species of bird that eats a lot of different like berries from trees and stuff, called cedar waxwings. I can't remember the exact berry that they eat, but I can look it up and contribute it in a few minutes.
I do know actually this one type of flower we have here at the Wilds, purple cone flowers. They're like a purple flower with a cone on it, hence the name. But I know Wyatt actually was talking about, I think, maybe that golden finches like to eat the seeds from them and some other birds as well. I see them out in our restored prairie. So, you know, those types of flowers and things are good to.
Flowers, yeah, marigold and
Beauty berry bushes are another bush, and then red mulberries are something you could also look into too. Those are like small shrub-like trees. But boxwoods are another really good one too that have berries that birds like.
So obviously that's something you'd have to check with your parents about before trying to plant a bunch of new plants in your backyard. But if you can get your parents to get on board with planting some native species as opposed to maybe like ornamentals that don't do anything for nature, get them to plants. Oh, Trevor's here. Hang on. Sorry about that. We have one more person join us right now.
Yeah.
Again, just get your parents to plant like some native flowers, native shrubs, trees, even if you can support those in your backyard. Pretty much anything. If you go, notice a lot of places will have native plant sales, where like a bunch of people that are experts in native plants as far as flowers and gardening, they'll come together and they'll sell a bunch of different plants that are native to your area, that your local wildlife, birds, even other animals as well will be able to feed from. So I don't know exactly what you might have in your particular local areas, but if you're interested in that and want any help figuring that sort of thing out, let me know and we'll see what we can do. Now, Yao, you're also really involved in citizen science, I know. That's actually how we met, through the Citizen Science Association. And I've been giving these guys each week during talking some different activities about citizen science, ways to get involved in their own research and help to learn about the natural world. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about maybe your involvement in citizen science and how it's benefited you and your community?
Yeah, joining the ICBO, we presented the Citizen Science Conference in North Carolina in 2019. It's an exposure to gaining knowledge from different forms of organization that participated, and then focus on the community education and focus on STEM, bringing science to the doorsteps of our local community, involving like children. That, for instance, the citizen science project that I'm working on with my communities, right now, like even with the birds, I'm including the children, because in my community, it takes about an hour walk from the village to the town to go to get access to education. So children below the age of 10 who cannot walk have no access to education. They just stay in the village. So those that are above 15, they can walk back and forth. So for them, education starts at early age, not like at young age as them. So with citizen science projects and concept based on equity, diversity and inclusion, this is a good project to involve the little ones in talking about birds. It's like involving them in a science project at the very age. For them understanding the essence of birds, essence of tree, essence of clean air, clean water, it's like preparing a generation towards reality. That is the project that I'm working on right now with citizen science.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I do see in the chat also, we have a question from Caitlin, who's wondering about a bird that you saw. I know Ashley replied to that, asking where she lives. She lives in Ohio, I know. So I guess Caitlin, follow-up question for that is, do you know what color it had on the wings? Because I know there's lots of different blackbirds that have color on the wings. Red-winged blackbirds are one of my favorites because they look exactly like the name says. And I
was going to say red-winged blackbird as well.
I appreciate that a lot about them, and that's my go-to guess for a blackbird with color on its wings, because it's the only one I know.
So Rachel and I actually answered her question. We do think it was a red-winged blackbird.
Okay.
Yep.
That didn't come through on the chat. Okay, so you must have done that already. So never mind then, we got that figured out. I just didn't see that. Okay, so I guess now that we're about to wrap things up, does anyone have any final questions for either Miranda or Yao about birds, citizen science, any of the things that they've talked about? I do also have one question for both of you that I usually ask all of our guest speakers. If you could give any advice to your middle or high school self, if you've got a bunch of middle high school students here trying to figure out their careers in conservation, things like that. So if you could talk to your own self in middle or high school and give yourself some advice, what would you say? Either one of you can go, or take a little time to figure it out.
Yeah. It is good to have topic and then question towards whatever you want to be, whatever you want to study. And then first of all, ask yourself, why do I want to choose this path? Am I sure to be, do I see myself as a better, or I see myself maybe studying rhinos or maybe studying big animals? Have that faith in you. You can be anything your mind agrees with, because the sky is the limit.
Amen.
I really like that. Another thing to add on to that as well that I would kind of tell myself would have to be just that there's a lot more out there than what you think is out there. There's so much that I've learned about, like even just my first year of college. Like I think I knew salamanders existed, but I had never like researched salamanders. And then you find out that there's just this really cool amphibian that lives just about everywhere, and like they breathe through their skin, and they're these really cool little like lizard looking guys, and they can't bite you, they can't hurt you, and they're just like a really cool thing you can go look for. There's so many different species of them. There's some in Ohio. There's just so many things out there. I didn't know how many bird species there were before I did my stuff in college. I had no idea that there were like thousands of species of birds, and just the sheer like it's just so neat to be able to look into that and realize, oh, not every bird I see is just a bird. That's a cardinal, and that's a golden wing warbler, and there's just so much I wish I would have known when I was younger, and you guys are already on the right track. The fact that you're even here listening to this talk with Yao and I is like amazing. Like you're here on a Saturday night learning about birds. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Like that to me sets you guys apart from just about everyone. So I think that's something to really, really commend you guys for, and I think that just keep that curiosity and keep looking at things, and don't take everything at surface value. There's so much more behind everything.
Well said.
Thank you.
We do have another question from Caitlin here in the chat. She's wondering about pigeons. Would you consider pigeons really pests or not? Anyone how to answer that?
Pigeons are kind of established now. I mean, their populations, especially in like I think cities and like can be a little high, but I don't think they're necessarily considered a pest bird anymore. I think they're very well established, and they aren't invasive or anything of that nature. They might be more of an exotic species, but they're not invasive, so to speak.
All right, good question, Caitlin. Give it a little more time. Anyone have any other final questions you want to ask these two while you got them here? If not, then I will also ask you each, what is your favorite type of bird, if you can pick one?
I have a soft spot in my heart for yellow-billed cuckoos after all my work I did with them. They're just a really fun bird, and all the work I got to do with them was a lot of fun. So I really, really like those, and like even just like hearing them when I got to hear one at the Jones Center when they were here breeding over the summer, and it was like the coolest time. I got so excited hearing it. So that's probably my favorite right now.
I am debating between the falcon and then the woodpecker. The falcon, because it's just amazing watching Animal Kingdom, and then watching how fast and how they can act. It blows mind, their features. And then I work outdoors sometimes, so just looking at the woodpecker, the way they climb the wood as if they are using like a belt and climbing equipment, it's amazing. I don't know how they do that. Those are my reasons. I have to contemplate between the two, but I think I will give it to falcon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have
yeah, Caitlin, I think asked a couple more questions in the chat. I don't know if she was asking both of us or what I can answer first. Consider teaching. I actually have. I think in the future I would like to teach more. I really like sharing wildlife with people, and like seeing people get passionate about wildlife. And so in the future, that could definitely be something I would be interested in. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards researching, but I think I'm definitely going to continue to do outreach and teach. And then in the future, when I'm older, I've thought about teaching at a college or a nature center or something of the sort. And have I ever worked with owls? I have not worked directly with owls, but I would love to. There's some cool operations going on in Georgia with northern saw-whet owls that I would love to get involved with. They're small species of migratory owl that are really cool.
Yeah, about the same question. I have not worked with owls. And then again, I'm a beginner in birding, taking classes, and then also working with my community. About considering teaching, yes, that is, my vision is something that I stick with community engagement, community development. So I think this, it involved working with both adults and the young ones. So teaching, yes.
I have one final question actually for both of you that I meant to ask earlier, but I forgot to. Miranda was talking about how birders will sometimes have goals of birds they'd like to see, birds that maybe travel far away to go try to find and stuff. Do either of you have a bird that is on your bucket list of a bird to try to find somewhere in the world?
Oh, there's like a lot of birds I would love to see. I would have to say one of the coolest ones that I would really like to see are albatrosses. They have the longest wingspan of all the birds. Wandering albatrosses have a 13-foot wingspan, and that's insane because for their body size, it like doesn't even make sense. And then one that would probably never happen that I would love to see would be an ivory-billed woodpecker. Supposedly they've been extinct for a long time, but there are people out there that believe that they still exist. So
I am still trying to remember and then find a bird I loved when I was young. I don't know the English name of it. It's called pipinipi. It's very it's like brick. It looks like the color of a cardinal, but small size like a hummingbird. But it doesn't have the characteristics of a hummingbird. And it was on my mind when I was in Ghana earlier this year. I tried to take a look at one, never. Then I asked, I'm like, have you guys seen this bird again? They were like, oh, that's a long time bird. So that would be the bird I would like to see within my community. And I'll try to find the English name for it, and then I'll send it to Paul and then to Miranda as well.
That's a challenge right there.
Awesome.
I'm sure it's out there somewhere, I bet.
It's somewhere. It's there somewhere. It's very common. When I was young, but right now, most of the birds I used to see when I was young is hard to find.
Yeah,
all you see around is crows.
That's why it's important for bird research. Definitely, there's been so many declines of birds. It's insane. But yeah. I also think about I don't have any species in particular that I remember as a child. But after I learned all about birds and everything, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my gosh, how many like rare birds have I seen that I never knew were rare because I didn't even pay attention to birds.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does take us to about 7 o'clock now. So if no one else has any final questions, thank you both to Yao and Miranda for joining us today. I'll have the recording available in the drive shortly after it finishes saving, so that'll be available if anyone wants to go back and re-listen to anything. And again, thank you all for joining, and I'll hopefully see you all, well, maybe not all of you, but all the talking people next week.
Yeah, if you guys ever have any questions or need bird help, you can ask Paul for my email, and you can email me photos of birds, and I can try to help you out. Or if you have any more questions about bird research, I'm glad to take any more questions outside of the chat. So just let me know.
And thank you very much for having me. And if any of you have a question about my project in Ghana, I'm very happy to forward it to you. And then also you can also contact Paul as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.